The sun hung low above Arlington National Cemetery, casting long solemn shadows across rows of white marble stones. A crisp autumn breeze carried the faint rustle of flags and the scent of freshly cut grass. The crowd gathered near the tomb of the unknown soldier stood in reverent silence, watching every precise movement of the tomb guard, an elite sentinel whose dedication was legendary. Private J, 32 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, moved with mechanical precision. His uniform, immaculate blue, shoes polished to a mirror sheen, reflected his years of discipline. His eyes, deep hazel and focused, betrayed no emotion. Each step he took, each pivot, was measured to the exact second. This was not a performance. It was sacred duty. Among the crowd stood an internationally famous singer known for his charm, talent, and a reputation for light-hearted pranks. He had come that day to witness the ceremony, but couldn't resist a joke. Leaning slightly forward, he whispered to his entourage, "What if I ask the guard to sing?" Imagine that, this stoic soldier breaking character. They chuckled quietly, unaware of how serious the ritual truly was. When the ceremony ended, and the relieving guard took position, the singer, flanked by cameras, stepped closer, a grin playing on his lips. "Hey soldier," he called lightly, "you've got the posture of a rock star. Can you sing as well as you march?" A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Tourists and locals alike exchanged uneasy looks. No one spoke to the tomb guard. It was an unspoken rule of respect. The air grew tense, but Private J didn't react with anger. He stood motionless, eyes fixed ahead, the ceremonial rifle resting against his shoulder. Seconds ticked by, the silence louder than any words. Then, slowly, deliberately, he turned. The singer's smile faltered. Something in the guard's calm, unblinking stare pierced through his playful facade. But before anyone could speak, the guard shifted his stance, removed his cap, and, in a deep baritone voice that seemed to rise from the very earth beneath the tomb, began to sing, "Amazing Grace." How sweet the sound! The melody floated across the marble plaza like a prayer. The singer's grin vanished, replaced by awe. His eyes glistened as the guard's voice grew stronger, raw, soulful, echoing between the silent pillars. Tourists froze, cameras forgotten. The air itself seemed to still, every sound swallowed by that haunting voice. When the final note faded, even the wind seemed reluctant to move. The crowd stood transfixed, unsure whether to applaud or remain silent. Private J replaced his cap, resumed his stance, and returned to attention expressionless, unshaken, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The singer swallowed hard, his earlier mischief gone. I didn't know," he murmured to no one in particular. Behind him, an elderly veteran whispered, "Now you do." Some songs aren't just sung, they're lived. The ceremony continued. But for everyone who stood there that day, the image of a soldier singing beneath the flag's shadow would never fade. The video went online less than 24 hours later. It wasn't meant to. The singer's media team had recorded it for fun, thinking it might become another harmless viral clip. But when they reviewed the footage, silence filled the editing room. The guard's voice, deep, unshakably pure, cut through the speakers like a blade of light. It wasn't just a performance. It was reverence, sacrifice, pain, and pride, all woven into one voice. No one dared add background music or effects. The singer himself sat quietly, replaying the moment over and over, his usual confidence replaced by something unfamiliar, humility. By morning, the internet exploded. Headlines appeared across major networks. "Unknown soldier sings Amazing Grace, moves the world to tears." Clips flooded TikTok, YouTube, and newsreels. Comment sections overflowed with disbelief and emotion. "I've never heard anything like this. That's what true respect sounds like. I cried and I don't even know why." Outside the digital world, Crowds began gathering again at Arlington. Visitors brought flowers, flags, handwritten notes. The guards maintained their duty with unwavering precision, but whispers filled the air. Which one was he? Who sang that song? Meanwhile, the singer faced a storm of mixed reactions. Some praised his humility for staying silent after the incident. Others criticized him for interrupting a sacred ritual. Yet, when reporters approached him, he didn't defend himself. Standing before flashing cameras, he simply said, "That man reminded me what respect means. I went there to watch a performance. I left having witnessed grace." Back at the barracks, Private J remained unaware of the chaos. Guards had no phones while on rotation. They lived apart from fame, under an unspoken code of silence. Only after his shift ended did his superior officer approach him quietly. "Son," the officer said. Holding a tablet with the video paused at the moment Jay began to sing. "You're all over the world right now." Private J stared at the screen for a long time, his brow furrowed. "I didn't mean for that," he murmured. "I know," the officer replied softly. "That's why it matters." That evening, as he walked past the marble rows, the setting sun dipped below the horizon, turning the sky gold and crimson. A group of children passing by recognized him, waving shyly. "You're the singing soldier," one of them shouted. He smiled faintly, a rare gesture, and saluted. Then he turned back toward the tomb, his boots echoing softly on the stone path. To him, it wasn't about fame. It never was. It was about the promise made in silence, to stand watch, to honor the fallen, and to never forget. As the wind rose again through the cemetery, it carried a faint echo, his own voice, lingering like memory. 3 days later, the world still buzzed with the story of the singing soldier. News anchors spoke of him with reverence. Reaction videos multiplied by the hour. Yet amid all that noise, the man himself remained silent. Inside the guarded quarters of the Tomb Guard barracks, Private J maintained his shift rotations like nothing had changed. He still polished his rifle until it gleamed, checked his uniform twice before stepping onto the plaza, and recited the creed under his breath. To the world he was a hero. To himself, he was simply doing his duty. But fame has a way of finding its mark. One gray morning, as mist drifted over the white stones, an unmarked black SUV pulled up near the ceremonial gate. From it stepped the famous singer, now dressed simply in jeans and a dark jacket, his usual confident posture replaced by quiet determination. He had requested, through proper channels, to meet the guard privately. The request had taken days to approve. When Private J entered the small briefing room, he froze. Across the table sat the man who had once mocked him. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them felt heavier than any crowd. The singer rose to his feet. "I came to apologize," he said, voice low but steady. "I thought it would be funny. I didn't understand what this place meant. What it means to you." Private J studied him quietly, his expression unreadable. "You do now," he finally replied. The singer nodded. "I do. That song, what you did, it changed me. It changed a lot of people." He hesitated, then added, "The world wants to hear more. Record labels, interviews, invitations. They want you." The soldier looked away, almost uncomfortable. "That's not why I sang," he said. "It wasn't a performance. It was respect." "I know," the singer said quickly. "That's exactly why it mattered." For the first time, a faint smile touched Private J's lips. "I'm glad it reached people," he said. "But some things are meant to stay sacred." The singer leaned forward, sincerity shining in his eyes. "Then let me help you protect that. Let's do something good with it. Donate every cent it earns. Honor the fallen. Help veterans. Let that voice serve again." The soldier was silent for a long moment, then slowly extended his hand. "Only if it's done with respect." The two men shook hands, one known for fame, the other for silence. For the first time, there was no wall between them. Just understanding. Outside, the fog lifted as sunlight broke through, washing the marble cemetery in gold. The echo of Amazing Grace seemed to drift again, only now it carried not sorrow, but peace. A week later, the nation was still humming the same haunting melody that had captured its heart. Amazing Grace had become more than a song. It was a reminder of humility, of sacrifice, of the silent strength behind the uniform. The singer kept his promise. With careful planning and the blessing of the Military Public Affairs Office, he helped establish a charitable project, Grace for the Fallen. Its mission was simple yet profound: aid veterans, honor fallen soldiers, and provide support for families who had lost loved ones in service. Every recording, every broadcast, would direct proceeds to that cause. But there was one condition: Private J would remain anonymous. No interviews, no appearances, no profit. Only his voice. The first recording took place in a small chapel near the cemetery. There was no production crew, no fancy microphones, just an old piano, a few candles, and the sound of boots softly echoing on marble floors. The singer handled the arrangements himself, making sure it stayed pure. When the guard began to sing once again, every person in the room fell still. His voice carried the same quiet reverence as before, but now it was joined by a purpose larger than either man. The harmony between his deep tone and the piano's gentle notes filled the chapel, rising to the ceiling like prayer. When the last note faded, the singer looked up, eyes shining. "That was perfection," he whispered. Private J shook his head. "No," he said softly. "It was duty." Days later, the recording went public, simply titled Grace for the Fallen, Live at Arlington. There were no faces shown, no credits other than the cause. Within hours, it topped digital charts around the world. Thousands of veterans wrote letters, thanking whoever the voice belonged to. Families sent photos, poems, folded flags. For the first time in years, a viral trend didn't sell fame, it honored it. The singer attended every meeting, every press event, but each time someone asked who the mysterious soldier was, he gave the same answer: he doesn't want recognition. He already has it in silence. One evening, as donations surged and praise poured in, the singer returned to Arlington alone. The sun was setting, painting the sky in deep crimson and gold. He stood near the tomb, cap in hand, and whispered, "You were right. Some songs aren't meant for applause." Unseen. From the distance, the guard on duty paused, mid-step, and gave a subtle nod in acknowledgement. Between two men forever bound by one moment of grace, 2 months had passed since the release of Grace for the Fallen. What began as a humble tribute had become a phenomenon. The song played in memorial services, military bases, and even classrooms. Presidents quoted its lyrics. Choirs performed it at candlelight vigils. Every note carried the spirit of reverence the guard had poured into that moment. But with fame came curiosity. The world wanted to know who was the voice behind the song. Journalists swarmed Arlington, filming endless documentaries and chasing rumors. One name surfaced, then another. Every day, someone claimed to have found the singing soldier. Photos of guards circulated online, faces blurred, each caption more speculative than the last. Private J tried to ignore it all. Within the barracks, the tomb guards continued their shifts undisturbed. Bound by the creed, "My standard will remain perfection." Still, the whispers found their way in. Some guards quietly admired him. Others worried that attention could tarnish their sacred duty. Then one morning, during inspection, his commanding officer approached with a tense expression. "It's gone too far," he said, holding a newspaper. On the front page was a photo, grainy, but unmistakably him, singing during the ceremony. Private J exhaled slowly. "So it's out." They're calling for interviews, television appearances, even an award ceremony, the officer said. But you have a choice. Speak or stay silent. The guard's gaze drifted toward the window, where sunlight spilled across the marble headstones. If I speak, he said quietly, it becomes about me. If I stay silent, it stays about them. The officer nodded with respect. Then I think you already know your answer. That evening the singer called. They know it's you, he said softly. If you want, I can tell them to stop, or we can share your story properly, with dignity. But the guard's reply was simple. The story was never mine. Let the song speak for itself. When the awards ceremony arrived, the singer stood on stage alone, holding the golden plaque that bore both their names. Cameras flashed, and when asked where the soldier was, he smiled faintly and looked upward. He's exactly where he's always been standing watch. At that same moment, miles away, under the silent stars of Arlington, Private J marched his slow, measured path before the tomb. The wind moved softly through the trees, carrying the faint echo of amazing grace. He had become a symbol, not of fame, but of quiet devotion. And though his name was now known, his silence spoke louder than any song ever could. The winter air bit sharper now, threading through the marble rows of Arlington like whispered memories. The holidays were near, and with them came more visitors' families, veterans, children holding wreaths with trembling hands. Private J stood guard as he always had, the click of his heels echoing through the stillness. But this night, something felt different. A shadow lingered beyond the gate, an old man, wrapped in a faded military coat, holding a single white rose. When the shift ended, the guard approached him quietly. The man's face was weathered, his eyes the pale blue of someone who had seen too much and spoken too little. You're the one, the veteran said softly. The singing guard. Private J hesitated, scanning the man's uniform insignia. Sir, I'm just doing my duty. The veteran smiled faintly. Duty ... yes, but your song, it brought someone home. The soldier frowned. What do you mean? The old man reached into his pocket and unfolded a yellowed photograph. Two young soldiers stood side by side in the desert sun, grinning despite the dust and exhaustion. One of them was the veteran himself. The other, his best friend, wore a small silver cross around his neck. He was killed in Iraq. 2003, the man said quietly. We were pinned down for hours. Before the medevac came, he kept humming Amazing Grace. Said it reminded him of his father's funeral. Said it made him feel like someone was still watching. Private J listened, his throat tightening. When I saw that video, when you sang that same song, in that same way, I swear, I heard his voice again. The veteran's eyes glistened. That's why I came. Not to thank you, but to tell you. You gave peace to a ghost that's haunted me for 20 years. The guard didn't know what to say. He wanted to explain that it hadn't been planned, that he'd sung from something beyond himself. But he simply nodded, stepping closer. I didn't mean to make it about me, he said. It was just respect for every name on these stones. The veteran looked around, his breath misting in the cold. That's what makes it sacred. You sang for all of us. He placed the white rose at the tomb and saluted. Then, before turning away, he whispered, "Keep singing, soldier, even if it's in silence." As the man walked off into the night, the guard stood there long after his watch had ended. The wind carried a faint echo through the rows of headstones, soft, distant, and achingly familiar. And for the first time, Private J realized that the song wasn't his to begin with. It belonged to every soul who never got to come home. And to those who still remembered them, the news had spread far beyond Arlington. The video, just 2 minutes of solemn reverence and unexpected song, had reached millions. Across living rooms, classrooms, and veterans' halls, People sat still as the voice of a nameless guard echoed from their screens. Weeks later, a letter arrived for Private J. It bore the seal of the Department of Defense. Inside, a simple request. You are invited to attend the National Memorial Ceremony as an honored guest. He didn't understand why. He wasn't a celebrity or a hero. He was a soldier who'd sung one song once. But his commanding officer's tone left no room for debate. You will go, soldier. Not for yourself, but for what that moment meant. The day of the ceremony dawned cold and gray. The Capitol dome loomed under a blanket of clouds as hundreds gathered, politicians, generals, families of the fallen. Cameras lined the edges, waiting for something headline-worthy. When Private J stepped onto the stage, the audience rose to their feet. But there was no applause, only silence. The kind of silence that feels like respect. A military band stood ready behind him, instruments gleaming under the pale light. The conductor nodded, signaling for him to begin, but the soldier didn't move. He stared at the flag-draped memorial before him, the rows of names carved into stone, and something inside him whispered, "This isn't a performance." So he raised a hand slightly, motioning for the music to stop. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. The cameras zoomed in, searching for a story. Then instead of singing, the guard stepped forward and saluted. The gesture was simple, but every movement carried weight. His white-gloved hand rose to his brow, steady, unwavering, and in that stillness, no voice, no melody. The air itself seemed to tremble. The audience fell completely silent. Even the wind that stirred the flag seemed to pause. Tears welled in the eyes of a woman in the front row, clutching a folded flag to her chest. A general bowed his head. Somewhere among the crowd, the old veteran from Arlington stood, holding the same white rose. After a long pause, Private J whispered, just loud enough for the microphones to catch, "Some songs don't need to be sung again." He lowered his hand, turned sharply, and walked off the stage. For a few heartbeats, the entire nation sat frozen before their screens. Then, slowly, people began to raise one by one. Across the field, across homes and cities, standing in silence, mirroring his salute. That night, newscasters would replay the moment over and over, calling it the loudest silence in American history. But to the guard, it was simply a tribute to those who'd sung their last note long before him. Winter had settled deep over Arlington. The trees stood bare, their branches tracing patterns against a pale sky. Snow blanketed the rows of graves like a soft shroud, quiet and unbroken. Private J returned alone that morning. His leave had been extended after the ceremony, but he hadn't gone home. Instead, he came back here, to the place where everything had started. The tomb of the unknown soldier stood before him, untouched by time, by fame, by the world outside. The marble was cold beneath his gloved hand, yet familiar, almost comforting. He adjusted his cap and stood silently, the same way he always had. But something was different now. He wasn't just guarding the unknown anymore, he was guarding a memory shared by millions. From behind him came the faint crunch of boots on snow. He turned slightly and saw people, dozens of them, walking up the hill. Some wore uniforms, others winter coats, scarves, or old medals pinned to their chests. Families, veterans, children. No one spoke. They simply gathered around the tomb, forming a quiet circle. Among them, he recognized a face, the old veteran who had once told him about his friend in Iraq. The man nodded slowly, holding another white rose, and then, without a signal or a plan, someone began to hum. Softly at first. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. The melody floated through the cold air, trembling but pure. Another voice joined, then another, until the sound swelled, spreading across the field in waves of reverence. The soldier felt his throat tighten. He didn't sing this time. He simply listened. The hymn rose and fell like the wind, weaving through the marble rows and trees. echoing faintly against the monuments. It wasn't perfect, some voices cracked, others broke with emotion, but that only made it more real. When the song ended, silence fell once more. The kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. Private J stepped forward and saluted, eyes glistening. "Rest easy," he whispered under his breath. "You're not forgotten." The veteran placed the white rose on the tomb, its petals catching the morning light. Snow began to fall again, gentle and endless. As the people slowly dispersed, one family lingered. A young boy looked up at the guard and asked, "Sir, was that you in the video?" Private J smiled faintly. "It was all of us, son. Everyone who still remembers." The boy nodded, saluted clumsily, and ran to catch up with his parents. The guard turned back toward the tomb. The wind stirred, carrying a faint echo across the stone. Soft, distant, and impossibly familiar. It wasn't his imagination. Somewhere in that cold, still air, Amazing Grace was being sung again. And for the first time, he didn't feel alone.